Over at BangTheBook.com, we are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. Lots of great stuff. Very good group of writers over there putting out some high-quality material for you. My college football power ratings went up on Monday. Opening line reports as well. Some situational betting tips for this week in college. Doing NASCAR and UFC for you this week also. Then we'll have Danny Vorgs' updated NFL power ratings. Those are always fantastic. A very good read with those. Getting closer to the NHL season. Parker Michaels will be making his return to BangTheBook.com very shortly with a look at some stuff out there in the futures market. We got WNBA playoff coverage, continued Major League Baseball coverage. A lot of stuff going on over at the website. Make sure that you check it out. As you know, this and every edition of Bang the Book Radio presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. BTB, the number 200, is that promo code. 100% deposit match bonus for the Sportsbook. 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino at BetDSI. It's only a game until you bet it. Before I bring on my first guest, Bryan Leonard, I do want to let you know that we're recording this on Tuesday afternoon. Got a prior commitment on Wednesday morning. Can't do the show live. So obviously some of these lines may have moved around a little bit in terms of being about, 21 hours or so away from when we usually do the show. I will post it earlier in the morning on Wednesday, hoping that we get out in front of some of those line moves and stuff like that. But I just want to let you know that some of these lines, some of these prices may have definitely moved around in the time between recording and actually posting the show. I apologize for that, but I wanted to make sure that I got the Wednesday show out for you. So we'll do the best we can here with this show. We'll be back to normal with the regular recording time on Thursday. Got one guest. Well, I got two guests here on today's show. We'll start things off with professional handicapper Bryan Leonard from WagerTalk.com. Bryan, how's it going today, man?
Everything's going great. Just put up a big 5% play on the Friday college football card. 27-9 in the last year on our 5% plays. Love this play on Friday. And you pick that up with a guarantee of 150% of your purchase price coming back to you if we fail to cover this game, but I don't think we have to worry about that one. Love this game for Friday. I don't do a lot of promotion on your show, Adam, and I appreciate you giving me the chance to talk a little bit about what I do. But, I wanted to get that out there for Friday. Loving this play. But we're going to be talking about some Saturday college football action.
We are, but I'm going to hold off on that for a minute because you and I were talking a little bit before we started recording here, and one of the luxuries of pre-recording is I do get to shoot the shit with my guests a little bit. You and I were talking about Major League Baseball and how it's become such an afterthought for a lot of people. I did mention baseball on Monday's show, sort of saying that, if you've got some of these really big underdogs that are still trying hard, they may be good bets at this point in time against teams that have either been furiously trying to get back into the playoff picture or teams that have just been playing at a very, very high level for a long period of time. Do you get that same feeling as well, or do you feel like it's going to be really chalky these last, week and a half, 2 weeks of the season?
It's normally really chalky, and it's the right way to go about it when you're looking at baseball anymore. You have the haves and the have-nots, but I didn't understand the line move yesterday. Washington was at St. Louis. Both teams with obviously a lot to play for. Both teams were red-hot pitchers on the mound. Washington opened, I believe, a 110 favorite, went all the way up to like 145, and that was – and I'm a big believer in following the markets, but that was just so out of range. And I came in with St. Louis as my play last night, a nice 4-2 winner. Sometimes the line moves, people look at that and they think it's going to continue to move, and that's the right side. People got to remember, we talk about this all the time. You're betting numbers, you're not betting teams. And once it went from 110, sure, I could see Washington at 110. They've got an ace on the mound, a team that needs to win. But it gets up to 140, and then you got St. Louis going with a pitcher who was even more red hot his last 7 starts, and St. Louis has been playing a little bit better, and you're catching them at plus 130 or whatever in a game that should be more in the pick'em range. And I even said that in the write-up. And it's just one game, anything can happen. But St. Louis wins that game, and rarely do you see a team fighting in the playoffs, fighting for the playoffs, as a home underdog, catching that kind of number. And we got it yesterday. And I actually have a baseball play up today that I thought was very similar. The line is moving a little bit. I released it as early as I can so we could take advantage of that. But there's so many people right now just have either had a bad baseball season or they've given up on baseball to work on football. There's still plenty of money out there in baseball to make, and we made 181% profit the last 2 years. I'm getting ready to triple our clients' baseball product in 2 years, profits in 2 years. It's just been tremendous, but yet people would rather bet on the nationally televised game that really doesn't have much of an edge, as opposed to betting something else that is definitely has an edge, and we've proven it the last 2 years.
Well, admittedly, it wasn't my proudest moment to give up on the baseball season here this year, but I agree with you. There's still equity to be had out there, especially for those that are still, dipping into that market. And also, too, I mean, you've got so many call-ups. You've got a lot of different-looking lineups, stuff like that. And, a lot of times the modeling crowd going to spit out X based on, who's pitching, who's playing, and all that. Maybe sometimes there are some values in going the other way with some of those line moves. So, definitely an interesting thing to keep an eye on. And make sure you check out Bryan's baseball work over there at wagertalk.com the rest of the way. And look, I mean, I get it. I'm sure you could talk baseball all day, every day. There was a time where I could do that. It was like 3 months ago. But at this point in time here, it's all football for everybody. So that's what we're going to cover here on the show. And Bryan, I guess I'll ask you this to start things off. It's already week 4 of the college football season. It feels like it just started. Is this about the time where you start, making some concrete determinations about teams?
Well, you should be able to by now. You start to realize that certain teams aren't nearly as good as what you thought they were going to be. Other teams, and we've talked about this in the past couple of weeks with it on here, there's been somewhat of a surprise. We looked at Maryland, and we both talked about Maryland being probably our biggest gainer that we've used, and then all of a sudden Maryland plays an actual team with a defense. And it came back, and, they lose that game to Temple. So the more pieces of data you get, it's better for us, but it's also better for the lines maker. So he's looking at the same information as we're looking at. And unfortunately, by the time we get a good feel on somebody, the lines maker, chances are, has the same one. So it's nice to be, and I talk about this in baseball when you're looking at pitchers, it's nice to be able to have a pitcher who is very consistent each and every time out, and you know what you're going to get. But from a betting perspective, there's not any value there because they know the same thing as you do. If you could find something where, as if, in certain teams, or let's say take a look at another way, look at the football season, you've got certain quarterbacks that put up certain numbers at home, put up totally different numbers on the road. That's one more step than what you would look at a normal quarterback rating. You look at, golf. The Rams are going in to play Cleveland this weekend, and golf is much better when he plays at home, and he's much better when he doesn't have any pressure on him. Well, he's got to go on the road, and he goes up against that Cleveland defense that puts a lot of pressure on you when they're not jumping offside or roughing the quarterback. But that's something that you have to look at when you're betting that game. You're not getting home game golf, you get road game golf, and that's a different situation. Not saying I'll be on Cleveland, because the Browns, for the most part, to me, looked horrendous yesterday, and I don't know if that touched my money for a while yet, but they were able to get that win. But teams have played better. Certain quarterbacks play better against weak opposition as opposed to playing against good opposition. It's just different ways to break it down, and that's what you have to do when the lines are as good as what you think they are. You've got to take it another step or two and try to find some value. And one of the things I do is game grades. I use that for baseball. I use it for football. And one of the games we're going to talk about, the Michigan State game last week, the game grade tells me that Michigan State was the better team on the field, although they didn't get that victory over Arizona State. And that's something that I think we can use to our advantage. But when you take a look at that line, it opened 6.5, it's now up to 9.5, approaching 10. A lot of people are looking at the same thing.
At risk of not getting to everything that I listed on the script, I do want to touch on a couple of things here, and maybe this is a good time to do it since we are recording, a day early and that maybe some of these lines will move. But I wanted to get your take on circa opening up the college football market with both sides and totals. Because as somebody, in the state of Ohio like I am, I don't have access to anything that's out there in Nevada, anything that's out there at, in New Jersey, anything of that sort. So in terms of watching the market, BetOnline pops the openers on Sundays for college football with very low limits, mind you. But what they're basically doing at this point in time, they open between where Circa opened and where the lines have moved at Circa based on the open. So there's really not a whole lot of equity. It's not a mature market per se, but it's a market where they already have an idea. They already have a sense of direction. And I know these lines are still moving over the course of the week, but man, Circa, I don't blame them for this. I give them a lot of credit for willing to take on the risk, but they've made the college football market harder than I think I can ever remember it being.
I understand that, and I have a Circa app. I don't have my Circa app loaded, and people question that. They say, well, I thought you used to bet openers. Well, I would bet openers that were bad openers. The people over at Circa do an excellent job, and they're doing what we all want. They take bets. They put out lines early. They do everything. You're friends with Matt. Matt has just done a tremendous job, and Matt Lindemann over there. And even when he was at Caesars has kept a lot of things that he did, and I like the things that Caesars has done. Much better than the way it used to be, where you didn't know from, just a few years ago, that 1 week Wynn would put out opening numbers, another week Cantor would put out opening numbers, and a couple weeks actually Treasure Island would put out a couple numbers, and I'd only take $500, but you get there ready to bet, and then they go, oh, we're not ready, we're not putting them out later. Well, how do you run a business when you're going to be putting them out at different times of the day? Circa has changed all of that. Circa puts them out at the same time every week. I love it, but I respect their numbers so well, I don't need to have money into their account because every other place is opening the same numbers later on that day or the next morning. So you could still get your opening bets in a Circa, but you're getting them in against what I consider a very good line. A lot of the bettors will wait until Monday morning when everybody copies Circa and puts them out. And as the week goes on, it used to be you would have to have all your work done to bet into the open numbers. I myself have my work done, but I don't nearly need to have it done as fast as I had in the past because you've got more time to work on it because I know the lines are going to be there. These Circa lines have been good. They don't move a whole lot, which tells me that they're pretty accurate. But we've seen more lines move. Like this morning, I pay for a bunch of other services because basically my income is betting on games. One guy put out his 5 or 6 plays. As soon as he put them out, lines moved like crazy. I was only able to get his line on 2 of those games. He had 5 plays. But it gives me an idea of a guy that I highly respect which side he's on. And that way later on in the week, if the numbers haven't moved too much, maybe I could bet a slightly worse number. But it's just something that you could take care of as the week goes on. I get more and more information, and then I can bet them at those lines. And it's totally different than the way it was earlier. But to me, I like it a little bit better. I'm not getting down on nearly as much Sunday night, but I'm more confident in where I believe the line is going to move as opposed to in the past, because I think there was a lot of head fakes going on when people are only taking $500 a bet, and all of a sudden you take a couple 500s and the line moves a little bit, nobody buys back then. I go, well, shit, let me put another couple 500s in here, line moves again, nobody buys back. And then they come around and they say, well, all right, well, then when it gets down to game day, they can get the numbers they can pick off a little bit better. But it's a different game. Everybody's in this to do something different. I'm in it to pick winners. I'm not a guy who plays a lot of middles. So it's a little bit different game for me.
Well, and it's interesting you bring that up. And this is something that I've seen a lot in the market. I saw it a lot during baseball season in particular, where a lot of times the opening move in baseball was pretty true. The line might come back a little bit, but by and large, we'd see 20, 25, 30-cent line moves. A lot of times this year in baseball, and maybe it's been different here in September just because, of the bigger favorites and whatnot, but it felt like a lot of times early in the year, you'd get that initial move on a side that I agreed with, and you'd get the buyback. You'd get the scalp, you'd get the middle, you'd get the person that, wanted to either partial hedge or just arbitrage that type of game, somebody with significant money to move around. And I feel like there have been a lot of college football moves this year like that as well, where you get that initial move, and then all of a sudden later on in the week, it starts coming back again. And that's not just competing groups of sharps or anything like that. There's a lot of market massaging going on, a lot of head faking going on. And maybe that just speaks to the inherent efficiency of the market, where that's the way to beat it now, is to kind of play both sides, try to get middles, free roll wherever you can. It just seems like that's kind of the operating procedure for a lot of groups out there.
Well, going back to baseball, there was a lot of model makers who would hit the overnights in baseball. And you would have everybody is looking at the same numbers. So all of your model guys are all spitting out the same thing. So they would say Team A should be a 170 favorite. It opens up 130, so they bet it up. And then followers would continue to bet it up. And then when the day comes, the day of the game, you've got your handicappers coming in that are actually handicapping the games because from my perspective, I can't give out an overnight line on a game. In fact, I had two plays I released today. They both moved at least 15 cents from the time I released it. And just imagine if I was to release something on an immature market of the overnights, and I'd say we'll play Team A at minus 130. Well, by the time somebody gets around to the local bookie in the morning, the line's at 170, they can't bet it. So it leaves me out of that area being a guy who bets and also sells plays. From a betting standpoint, great. But from a selling pick standpoint, I can't do that. I have to know what your customers are. And customers, a lot of them can't bet offshore. And if they can bet offshore, they don't have the same accounts, which is always a concern. So in football, it's similar. The guys that are hitting those opening numbers are all doing it from a model perspective. Their model point says the line should be 9. The line comes out 4. They bet the minus 4. But when the games start, on Monday when everybody copies that, then you got the guys who are doing the handicapping. And there's certain games where I love a certain game, but I don't get the number I want. Now, later on in the week, I may end up playing the opposite of the team that I love because the number has gone so far to that side where I make my own numbers. And so I'll say, well, I love this game if I could lay the 7, but now I'm getting 10. So, my number is 5. I could have played it at 6. I could have played it at 7. But now it's at 10. I've got to start looking at the other direction.
Well, and what kind of made me think of this is Right Angle Sports actually tweeted this about a half hour or so before you and I started recording and started just shooting the shit before the show. Right Angle, who, by the way, is in the lead in the Super Contest Gold right now after 2 weeks, said, have we reached a point where more big line moves, especially early in the week, are caused by service releases than pros or groups actually betting? And I thought that was really interesting because, you've got different contexts of line moves out there in the marketplace. You've got some that are very respected groups. You've got some that are, service releases that just have people that, they send their plays out to subscribers and they cause a ripple effect in the market because it's, almost a line movement by volume. Then you've also got the professionals who, some of them may be modelers, some of them may be people like you. There are a lot of different kinds of professional bettors out there. It's interesting to see the way that this market has kind of moved forward and progressed over the last few years. And also, some of that modeling crowd comes from a DFS background where, they kind of realized, hey, DFS is kind of getting to a certain point. Let's go and bet with the model infrastructure that we already have. It's a fascinating market, and I think it's really hard to ascertain early in the week who is making that move and whether or not that move will stick.
It's interesting you talk about Edward Gold. I've been doing this forever. I started with Edward probably, it's got to be at least 10 years ago, and I bought his service, and for a while I could get the bets in that he had. And it's gotten to the point where it doesn't make any sense for me to buy it because I can't get the numbers. I told you about another service I used today, and I only got 2 of the 5 or 6 games that he released. I get Warren Sharp every year. Warren, to me, is the best NFL information guy out there. And he sends them out, and you hope to get the numbers. And that's in the NFL where everybody takes big limits in the NFL, and even it's hard a lot of times to get the numbers that he sends out. So you want the information, and you may not get the actual number he's releasing, which, it sucks that you can't get the number, but you get the information, and he's so good that it moves the number. And to be honest with you, all these sports books buy all the good services out there. Somebody complained about my putting a baseball out today, and the line's moving 10, 15 cents. Well, don't you think if the sports books know who's winning in baseball, they're going to have the same information? It doesn't cost a lot of money to buy my season service in baseball. You could have probably gotten it for $500 or something at a discounted rate over at Wager Talk, and that's nothing. That's less than a bet for most people. So they have the same information. When I'm sending out the information, they're getting the same information too. And I'm trying to get these bets in, knowing I'm not only competing with the other people who bought the service, but I'm also competing with the sports book who has that play, and he knows where the money's coming in. So as soon as he gets that play, he's going to start moving it regardless, moving on air. And that's something that it's different now than it was in the past. Is everybody at this point knows who's good, and they want to be part of that. And I know guys that don't do any handicapping at all. They just buy, this guy's the best baseball capper, I'm buying him. This guy's the best tennis capper, I'm buying him. And that's what they do. And it cost them a lot of money to bet it, to buy all these services, but they were able to take advantage of slow-moving books. And, unfortunately, that's one of the ways that you get kicked out. But, and here in Vegas, they're not allowed to kick you out unless you're William Hill or Staples or whatever. You go to South Point, you go to the Westgate, you go to Circa. They're not going to kick you out. They want that information. So those are the places that you're basically limited to play at.
It's so interesting. And again, there are so many more layers to this market, I think, than people realize. And especially when you consider, the different market forces that are in play and, who gets the respect, who doesn't, do those line moves hold? How much influence does the public have, especially in a market like the NFL? A lot of really interesting things that, it would take us doing multiple shows on just that to try and come up with some answers and some things for you. But, in any event, there's only so many hours in the day, but these are definitely discussions that you can have if you really wanted to. But, Bryan, as far as looking at some of these games here, you mentioned this game already, game 333, 334. You've got Michigan State and Northwestern. This one by listener request here, where Michigan State, you could have actually had them minus 6.5 early in the week. They're up to 9.5 now, and this was a line that even touched 10 at some places before coming back down.
I really wanted to play Michigan State. I think this is just a great spot for them. I talked about the game grade. They actually outplayed Arizona State. Michigan State's a team that doesn't give up running yards. They've only allowed 0.90 yards on the ground playing against Tulsa, Western Michigan, and Arizona State. Three decent teams. None of them are bad teams. There's parts of each of these teams that I like. We take a look at Northwestern. They played Stanford and UNLV, two teams I'm looking to fade, actually. And, Stanford's they run for 4.45 yards against those teams, but now they're going up against a team that can't run on. So you have to look at Northwestern from a passing standpoint. Passing grade so far, playing two teams that, once again, I'm looking to fade. Their passing rating is only 86.51. So they're going to have to pass against this Michigan State defense. And if they're a one-dimensional team, I don't care if you're playing at home or not, and as bad as this Michigan State offense has been, I can't see Northwestern putting many points on this board. But once again, this is the game I was looking to bet at 7 or less. Now it's at 9.5. I won't get on it at 10, but it will keep me off of Michigan State. Right now, they've priced me out of it. I'll see what's happened. Maybe I can find another way, maybe play them in the first half or something, go that way as the game approaches. But this is going to be very tough for Northwestern to score on this offense. Keep in mind, they only put up 30 points against UNLV, who's not very good offensively at all. And, Stanford is really down. They've really showed it the last few weeks. They only scored 7 against Stanford. So not looking for Northwestern to put up many points. Maybe we could play Northwestern points, team total under. something of that nature in this game. But the price now going up to 9.5 is priced me out. So we just got to find different ways to play this game.
Northwestern 110th in the country in yards per play. So it gives you an idea of how much they have struggled to move the ball. And, Bryan, something else that we have talked about here before in the past, and something we can mention very quickly here. Again, you look for context clues in the line to kind of give you an idea of how this game may play out. And you rarely see a team approaching double digits with a total of 40. And in fact, this one opened offshore at 38.5. So gives you an idea there of what you're looking at from this Northwestern offense and just how inept they could possibly be here in this game. We'll move on to game 355, 356 in the SEC East. Tennessee and Florida. Florida, a 14-point favorite. Doesn't seem like anyone's worried about the loss of Felipe Franks when it comes to Florida's power rating and how they have them priced for this game. Had a listener request for this one, though. So what are your thoughts on this game?
My lines go anywhere from 13.5 to 19.5 in this game. It's basically where I think it should be. I look at this game and, the line's right now 14. Looks like it's heading up to 14.5. Have not been overly impressed with Florida. Felipe Franks has not performed well. Now we don't have to worry about it. But keep in mind, there was a reason why he was the starting quarterback there. He's no longer there. I think people will get their hopes up a little bit, thinking that maybe he's not there and they'll be better. The coaching staff knows who the best quarterbacks are. They know he wouldn't have been starting if they had somebody better to replace him. Tennessee is a team that right now I don't know what the hell to get out of Tennessee. I bet on Tennessee against BYU in that game, and I thought I was in pretty good shape, and they ended up losing that game 29-26. To come back beat Chattanooga last week 45-0. But when you look at the game score there, they weren't overly impressive. Chattanooga's just not a very good team. On the season, we take a look at Tennessee. Opponents only 3.71 yards a carry, which isn't bad, but this team from a passing standpoint, they're very good against the pass. 98.07 passer rating they've given up, and you've got, as we mentioned, this Florida passing game, 166.18 with Franks, but yet to me he wasn't very impressive. So losing him, that could be a concern. I think the line is where it should be here. I want no part of Tennessee, but I think Florida is a little bit overrated. My lines are saying basically it should be in the 14-15 range overall. That's what we're getting here. So I'll likely pass on this one.
Yeah, I got this one in the 15.5 range, so I agree. I'm kind of in the same spot as you are, but look, Florida's not a team I want to lay big numbers with, and even Tennessee. It looks like a big number for Tennessee, but we all know how they look to start this season. We all know how they're kind of in a state of flux, I guess I would say, to put it kind of nicely. So I think it's a tough game to handicap. I think it's a tough spot. Again, some people may kind of be pulled in thinking, well, it's a big number for Florida with a backup quarterback, but also taking on a Tennessee team that, has struggled. And last week, I believe, in that game against Chattanooga, they were +4 or +5 in turnover margin. So that was not the runaway that you would expect it to be. They just took advantage of some short fields in an FCS team that turned the football over a little bit too often. All right, let's go to the MAC here. We got a listener request for this one, which is kind of fun. Game 377, 378, Bowling Green and Kent State. Kent State laying double digits in this one, Bryan.
Yeah, this was one of the games that was hit earlier by one of the guys that I follow. They played Kent State, went from 9.5 up. I find it hard being a MAC guy to want to bet on Kent State at this number, but Bowling Green really has not done well. The line went from 9.5, it's up to 10.5 now. Not a major move, but still you're going through that key number of 10. My numbers in this game are probably 10, 10.5, so it didn't have me interested. Kent has played some tough opponents, obviously, so far. Arizona State, Kennesaw State, and Auburn. The Kennesaw State, they only win by 3. So, but when they've gone up against the tougher schools in Arizona State and Auburn, they were pretty decent. But now the major drop back to play Bowling Green before they've got to go on the road and play Wisconsin next week. I think after playing Arizona State, especially Auburn and Wisconsin in 2 of the last 3 weeks, next week when they go to Akron, and 2 weeks when they go to Akron, that for their big rivalry game, I think that may be a spot where we could play the Dips, who looked horrendous this year, but you've got a team playing physical defenses in Auburn and Wisconsin to really beat them up. I think that may be a good spot coming up, depending on what kind of line we get. But Kent State's a team that they've done decently well against those bigger name schools. I just can't lay it here. Bowling Green has been bad. They have been bad, no doubt about it. But when you take a look at their rushing, 3.89 for 4.06 given up. They played Morgan State, Kansas State, and Louisiana Tech. The last 2 weeks, Kansas State and Louisiana Tech just beat them up badly. I had Louisiana Tech in the first half last week, and that worked out well. Do have concerns about the passing game at Bowling Green. They have not done very well defensively, allowing a passer rating of over 162. So they could be passed on. But the Kent passing game, I don't know if that's that great. To me, even though the line says 10.5, I can't lay the the Kent State here. Probably be a game that I sit out. Just knowing the history, and once you get in, keep in mind, we're to the point now of the season, this week, next week for the most part, where teams start playing conference games. For example, Air Force plays Boise. Boise plays Air Force every year. Or Air Force plays these non-conference games against teams that don't see them. It's going to be a totally different thing when you play these teams that have these special offenses that when they play out of conference, they have a big advantage on. But when they get into conference, you see the same thing as what you're saying. So you got to go back and check on how certain teams have played against these opponents when you're in a conference play. So a lot of times your teams like your Navies and your Air Forces that have played very, very well in non-conference games. Once they start playing teams that prepare for them every year, it makes a big difference. So keep in mind on that. But Kent State and Bowling Green are two teams that have both been bad, equally bad the last few years. To lay is double digits with a Kent State team. I don't think it'll get there, even though my number says 10.5.
All right, so we transition over to the NFL for a few minutes here, and look, the NFL's a tough market to beat. I mean, we kind of talked about this a little bit here this week on the show, that you really got to run on the right side of turnovers, injuries, officiating, pretty much a lot of different things, and hope that your bet still wins, even if you wind up on the right side of the game. So it's been a real challenge, to say the least. But, Brian, a couple of games I want to tackle here with you. First, Detroit and Philadelphia, which maybe looks like a little bit of a teaser candidate here with Philadelphia. Total coming down into the mid-40s. Philadelphia 6.5, 7-point favorite, depending on where you look. But this is the difference between the NFL and college football, where not much was expected of Detroit. Philadelphia, a bunch of weapons, although they got a bunch of injuries now too. And this line was above a touchdown, and now it's come down. This is kind of the whole concept of betting numbers versus betting teams in the NFL.
Definitely. I took Detroit early. I think I might have gotten an 8. I don't remember exactly. I know it was higher than 7. So I wanted to make sure I got that. I thought it would go down. You mentioned the injuries for Philadelphia. It's also a team who really hasn't looked good. After coming back and beating Washington, and then you see Washington get stomped last week. Atlanta was a team who was not very competitive in week 1. Philadelphia loses to them. So the Eagles, to me, coming into the season, were my pick to go to the Super Bowl out of the NFC, but they have not shown it. And a lot of it has to do with injuries. From a coaching standpoint, it's a mismatch here. Philadelphia's coaching staff is so much better than Detroit's. But Detroit's one of those teams that I had them in a nice teaser last week against San Diego. That worked out fine. I don't want to go against Detroit here. I think Detroit is a little bit underrated. But if this line gets down to 5.5 or 6, that might be a time where you take a look at Philadelphia, even with the injuries. But I don't think it's going that way. I think it gets down to 6.5, bouncing between 6.5 and 7 right now. I could see it going down to 6, but no lower than that. But if you could catch a full touchdown with Detroit, I recommend to play it. Normally, Philadelphia, as you mentioned, the teaser situation, going from 6.5 down to a half on a 6-point teaser, I don't think that's nearly as valuable as a team that's 7.5 and taking them down to 1.5, because the key number is 7 right now. You could bet Philadelphia without laying the 7. I think that's better than taking them down on a teaser if the line happens to close at 6.5. So I think you lose a little bit of value there on the teasers on that number 7. But Philly's a team that I really like, but they've got a lot of injuries. They haven't played well, and people are now starting to realize that, hey, even though we thought Philadelphia was the best thing in the NFC coming into the season, they haven't shown it. And there's a lot of teams that we thought very highly of that have not performed well. And you've got 2 data sets right now that are showing that some of your preseason work you need to start discounting and look at what we're seeing on the field. And Philly's one of those teams in that regard.
One more game to touch on here with you, Brian. Houston and the Chargers, game 483, 484. We jumped down to that 4 o'clock Eastern time window here, 4:30 almost, for this game. And, what kind of stands out to me here is that the Chargers don't have a full home field advantage in the NFL. I think a lot of us would agree with that. But they're still getting, the 3 with extra juice or the 3.5 here. A pretty clear stance that the Chargers are a better team on a neutral field than Houston. Do you feel like that's the case? I mean, is there some line value on the home team here?
I think a lot of that still comes from the preseason where a lot of people were picking the Chargers. Houston is one of those teams that offensively they're terrific. Defensively, I have concerns. They rush the passer very well, which is a big advantage in this game because the Chargers have some offensive line injuries. They also have a quarterback who, if you touch him, he falls, and I guess I can't blame him. When you're having as many kids as he has, you only have so much energy. But the Chargers coming into the season were thought of as being the better team here, and I think some of that is still lingering. I like the Chargers team, but it's very similar to Philadelphia. They've got some major injuries. They lose the tight end, who when he's playing, he's very good, but he hasn't been able to get many games, and that was a concern. Obviously, the running back's holding out. I don't think that's much to worry about, but we'll have to see how that goes as the season progresses. But, the Chargers have some injuries, and that's the problem. You mentioned the home field advantage. I don't know how well Houston travels. I know a lot of the other teams travel very well, and they'd love to take up the majority of those seats in L.A. Don't know if Houston is at that point where they're going to have a lot of people traveling to L.A., so don't know if that makes much of a difference. But I don't know. At this point, I don't know if I could trust either of these teams right now. Lines 3 minus 120, anywhere from that to 3.5. I think the line's about where it should be at this point. It's not one of the games that jumps out at me.
Bryan Leonard, professional handicapper over at wagertalk.com. You mentioned you got the 5% play up there for Friday. What else do you want to plug here at the end of the segment?
Yeah, like I said, 27-9 over the last year and 5% plays. Been doing very well. I don't give out a lot of big plays, and that's the one thing I've always prided myself on is if I've given out a big play, it's a play that is a big play. Other people out there will give you as many big plays as you want to bet because they know that's when people buy their plays is when they've got a big one. For example, last Sunday I had 6 small plays. I put them all in one package. I went 2-4, by the way. I didn't have a winning day in the NFL, but I didn't have anything I loved. And so I didn't have any 4s or 5s. And at least when you follow me and you follow most of the guys on our website as opposed to some of the others, they only put up the big plays when they've got them. Some guys have more than I do, but when I do put them out, it's a quality selection. You're getting my best. And in addition to that, we'll be doing videos on Wednesday like we always do, and hopefully we can get you some winners in that regard. But doing live betting show, we're taping this on Tuesday. I do one on, I believe, on Thursday also this week at sportsgrid.com on the internet. It's going to be on a couple TV websites, Pluto TV in a couple weeks. I know I get Pluto TV, a lot of good comedy shows on Pluto TV. It's a free service out there, but the show will be on that also. But it's a live betting show. We don't get to as much live betting as I'd like, unfortunately, but we do go over all the baseball games at night, and there are some times where we see some value, and we are able to make some money. And I've done pretty well on those so far, although we haven't had nearly as many of those as I would have liked in those spans. But a lot of good information, and that's right now this week on Tuesday and Thursday, doing that on Sports Grid at night once the baseball games go on.
And, of course, as always, you can follow Bryan on Twitter at @BLeonardSports. Bryan, appreciate your time as always, brother. Thank you so much for joining me, man, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Sounds great. Everybody have a real profitable weekend.